Welcome to Witham Sounding Board, a podcast sharing powerful business tips, insights, and trends for those seeking to become a rock star in their industry.
Welcome back to Witham CFO podcast series. I'm your host, Paddy Thomas. I am part of Witham's outsourced accounting and fractional CFO practice line. If you'd like to know more about what we do and how we support our clients, please go to www.witham.com/oasis. Joining me today is Jürgen Horn. I am really excited to have him on today. Jürgen is the founder and president of FedEx. I am fortunate to be part of the team here at Witham that supports FedEx operations, strategic accounting, and finance needs. Discussion with Jürgen will focus on his impressive journey in biotech, the type of finance and accounting support that the startup needs, and why it is crucial for both short-term and long-term success. Jürgen, welcome. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your career journey from the beginning? As far back you can go, as far back as you wish.
Let me start with, my actual career. I'm a veterinarian by training, and I always wanted to become, or initially I wanted to become a veterinary surgeon somewhere out in the field, in the countryside with mixed practice, similar to, if you know the show, James Herriot's All Creatures Great and Small, which is a story about a British veterinarian that works in the Yorkshire Dales and treats all animals, all species, cows and dogs and guinea pigs if necessary. So that's how I started off. I studied veterinary science in Germany and for 1 year at the University of Sydney in Australia. And after graduation, I went to the UK, so the Royal Veterinary College. So getting closer to my initial sort of dream of being a countryside veterinarian. And like James Herriot, I did a PhD there. I worked in the equine clinic and I worked in some practices. I helped out with practices in Kent and East Sussex. So initially I was all focused on becoming a countryside vet, but the longer I worked there, the longer I thought about it, the more time I spent in different countries, the more I got intrigued about, doing more than just the daily practice as a veterinarian, contribute maybe through science and connecting the science with business aspects. Driven by that, I joined Novartis Animal Health in Switzerland as a technical marketeer of all things. So that really combined business and science at the edge of the two aspects. And it brought me around the world, really. I had the opportunity in that job to travel to many countries, look into the animal health industry as a whole on the companion animal side, so dogs and cats and horses, but also on the farm animal side. Everything from, chicken, pigs, cattle, to fish farms in Japan. So really very interesting, very exciting, good insights in how, food production works, how different it is between the countries. In Switzerland, where cows are rescued by helicopter from the grazing in the Alps to, feedlots in Texas. So really very different approach to farming. And on the companion animal side, how the status of the pets, our dogs and cats and horses has really changed over the last, 20 years from, maybe an annex to the farm as for dogs, a working dog, to, some pets that you have around the house, but, sleeps in the kitchen or in the garden or in the yard, to a family member today. Right? It's really has a big it was a big transition even in, since I'm involved in animal health and veterinary medicine. And so I was more and more intrigued by that. And I was more and more intrigued by treating the diseases of these family members, dogs and cats. And at Novartis, I got the opportunity to work on innovation to treat our pet friends. What intrigued me especially was how do we get medicine innovation that is applied on the human side into veterinary medicine. And that's what I've been doing since 2005 or so. I had the opportunity to work at the Novartis Institute for Biomedical Research in Cambridge, Massachusetts for 2 years and experience drug discovery for human pharma. And that gave me a lot of insight and ideas how this could be applied to veterinary medicine.
Impressive. And then you had two ways. You either go with the companion animal or the livestock, right? You figured going the companion animal route was more beneficial. And you had a problem. You saw a problem that you could help solve with companion. And that gets you to Invetx. So why Invetx? What is the idea around Invetx?
Yeah, if you go back to that idea that we could bring innovation and treatments from the human side to the veterinary side, companion animals are just a little bit closer to humans when it comes to the type of diseases they have. Farm animals is a little bit different, right? It's all about food production, and nobody talks about cancer in cows, even though it does exist. But for dogs and cats, it's a little bit more relatable, and it's a little bit closer to human medicine in many ways. And some of the diseases are very similar from a scientific perspective, but also from a sort of impact on the animal itself and the family around it. So that was kind of the starting point. And so why Invetx? I have, during my time on the human side, discovery side, I discovered monoclonal antibodies, which at that time was already the biologics revolution was in full swing in pharma, with multiple programs being introduced, products being introduced, drugs being introduced on the human side, and the portfolios, the development programs were all around biologics and proteins, whereas on the veterinary side, we didn't have anything in that regard. It was all still chemicals and small molecules, as we call them. And so I had the idea: so why don't we introduce this technology into animal health? And monoclonal antibodies are particularly suited for dogs and cats because they're very targeted in what they do, and they're very safe, and they have to be applied in longer intervals. So you don't need to dose them twice a day or so. So the ones that are on the market now, you give an injection once a month, and the animal is treated, which, if you ever try to put a pill into a cat, you know how difficult that can be. And so that's what I saw a great benefit of that technology. However, at that time, making those drugs were really expensive, and getting access to the science was also difficult because there were only a few companies that were doing it on the human side, and they weren't kind of ready to hand over their technology for dogs and cats. So years went by, actually, before this technology, monoclonal antibodies were introduced in animal health. The first one hitting the market in 2017, and many people that have dogs may know the drug that came out first. It was Cytopoint by Zoetis, and that was the first monoclonal antibody that came out. And so, but it was only one. And my idea was that how can we do this in animal health in the most efficient way? And that's how Invetx was born. We didn't want to start a company that kind of tried to replicate on a smaller scale with less money what was done on the human side. But at the same time, I wanted to access the most advanced technology. And so our business model was slightly different from how everybody else had tried to get into this field, in that we looked for partners that had the most advanced technology on the human side, and they were willing to work with us to provide and give access to their technology for the application in dogs and cats. And that's what we did. So we approached a few companies that we thought that whose technology were the most suitable for what we wanted to do. And we were able to convince them that it was interesting and also lucrative for them to work with us. At the same time, I was able to work with a venture capital firm called Entera Capital that specializes in investments in agro and animal health. And together we founded Invetx.
Impressive. And I'm saying this, and I'm not saying this lightly. The fact that we were involved as soon as you can get us involved is really good. So you have the science down, you have your partners down, right? But then you have to look at the company from an holistic perspective, right? You want to make sure that every side, the finance and operation should be working in consonance with the science of itself, right? How does that experience how does it change your experience, or what did you get from having your financial strategy and growth lines?
Yeah, obviously, the science is one part, but starting a business needs other things too. You need somebody with legal expertise, you need somebody with financial expertise. And while I also was able to do an MBA at some stage, part-time MBA, I had some understanding, and I also experienced the startup world or a small company world after I'd been with corporate with Novartis first. I then joined a small company that was called NextVet as the chief development officer. So I had some experience and some understanding, but I didn't have hands-on experience how to set it up. So there were two aspects that I learned really quickly, that investors are interested in science, that it's solid. They are interested in, the outcome. What is the return of investment? How long does it take? How big is the risk? And then they are looking, I think, for reliability in the financial model, but also then once they're invested, the controls of the finances. It is important that you have sound accounting, that you have sound planning, and that you have control of your finances. And this is where, as a small company, you can't necessarily afford a CFO, and you can't open your own accounting department because you really want to focus on the science and delivering on that. So that's, I think, where the external partnering becomes important. And that's where eventually Wisdom came in. We started with a one-man consultant, which is a good way to start, but very soon you see the limits of that in form of what that one person can offer, and also what types of controls and professionality you need to make sure that your accounting is sound and you're in full control of your finances.
Yeah, it's expressive. And I always said this, and I think I've said this to you many times, when we had that first call, 2020 times 2020. One of the questions that you had was, okay, Jack, what's going to happen 6 months from now? I mean, we're moving away from a one-man shop to a much more larger farm. Would I be calling in 6 months and somebody else pick up the phone? Or would my call be going to a 1-800 number? And we told you then that our goal was to be part of Invetx and be talking to Jack and Cuddy. Now you're still going to be talking to them in the next 4 or 5 years. We've stuck to that because for us it's important, and for any accounting firm it's important to have a story and to be part of the story of clients. Is what Invetx offers. So with that said, you've touched on all our questions I already have, but what lessons have you learned from working with startups and how successful scaling into a hyper company?
Let me respond to your comment there about, knowing who you call. It is actually very important because you want your finance person, if I may call you that, to understand a little bit your business. You need to build a relationship and you need to trust each other. And it is very important that, you say 1-800 number, right? It's like if you call your big bank and every time you talk to somebody else, or you have an online platform that does the accounting for you, it's just not the same, right? You need a real partner. As a startup company, you can't afford a big organization of yourself. If you have a one-man show, when that one-man show goes on vacation, there is nobody there to help you on the finance front. So I think where you and your team have contributed significantly, and we have a long-term relationship now. And the big advantage was that it is a dedicated team in a larger organization. So you offer everything from, tax advice, and which we also work together on, which is a complicated area for a startup, right? and accounting and advice on financial systems and so on. So it was very important that we are still talking to the same people we talked to 5 years ago. And that makes a big difference. So that was important to me personally, but I think it also helps the startup company to succeed.
Yeah. And I think one of the benefits is having you as a client is the fact that you understand finance. Okay, you understand operation. But the fact is, you're a scientist. You can't be doing the other things because then it takes you away from it. But you understand the need and understand relationship. And it sometimes when that happens, it's easier for us, the service provider. But what happens with the folks that don't quite understand finance? What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think it's underestimated how important that is, the financial support and financial advice. Not only, fundraising is one thing. This is probably the biggest job of a startup CEO is fundraising. But then once you have the funds, you need to control them and you need to report on them, because your investors will be as interested as in your progress in the scientific front and whatever you develop as they will be to make sure that their money is safe, right? That it's used properly, it's properly accounted for, that there are controls in place, and that should be done in a way that is very efficient, right? Because you want to focus on the science, you want to focus on creating value for the company, creating value for the investors, and so you need the peace of mind that somebody is in charge of and helping you to manage your financial. And that is probably an underestimated part, that when scientists open a business, they forget about this. It's there's money in the bank and you spend it and the science is great and it's all a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, it matters a great deal, and demonstrating that you are in control of the finances, that you know how to plan, is critical for the confidence that the investors will have in you and your company.
That's good. That's a good point. So you can prioritize development, but then ignore financial operations. So what are the risks of neglecting finance and accounting just early on? You don't have to wait. Sometimes that'll wait 2, 3, 4 years before they're being on someone that can do the job. But would you agree that it makes sense to have it done earlier than later? It's like in better case.
The sooner, you need to have control of your financials from the get-go, right? I mean, when you say what are the risks, I mean, the primary risk is that you run out of money, right? And that is the end of your startup story. The other risk is that you lose trust, that your investors don't trust you handling their money at the end of the day that you're working with, and so that is another risk. There's a risk of waste, that you're paying too much, or you don't know what you're actually paying for what anymore, because the bigger you grow at the beginning, it's kind of easy, but the bigger you get and the more activities you start and the more people you have, you will not be able to recognize every single invoice that comes in and every single work order. So you need a system and somebody that helps you with that. So you quickly lose control, and that's a risk, right? That somebody overcharges you. You also have the risk always that it's misused, right? You are responsible for it, and it's not your money, it's the investor's money, and so you need to take care of it. And there's always the risk that somebody does something that is not appropriate. So, and that will break you and the company immediately, because then the trust is completely gone, and nobody will ever want to invest in your company again if you have a situation like that. So I think it is very important from the get-go that this is under control, that you have control of your finances, and you have the trust of your investors. And you can only build that if you have a professional to support you.
Okay, I cannot agree more with you. There was Mark mentioning that Bedex is considered our ideal client. So it's been like that, and we're proud to be part of your story, Jürgen. We're always going to be here to support you when you need us.
That's great to hear that. The ideal client. That's nice to hear. It's obviously it has been a long relationship, and we were successful in raising capital and set records for the animal health industry in that regard. And we also had recently a successful exit. So that is all very positive. And while we're now a part of a larger corporation, the acquiring company is obviously so confident in our financial management that they haven't changed it yet, right? So even more than half a year into after the acquisition, we are still working with you in managing our finances and doing the accounting. That I think speaks for itself. That the larger corporation didn't see too much of a risk and was happy with the way our systems are set up and how much control we have over our financials. I think that doesn't get much better than that in terms of a vote of confidence.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Now, before we wrap up, can we talk about football a little bit?
Sure.
I'm sure the folks at that crowd will listen to this at some point and just make fun of you. Bayern Munich was eliminated yesterday.
Yes. Thanks for mentioning that.
I was actually rooting for Bayern Munich, but I do know that Bayern is top of the Bundesliga, 6 points ahead of Leverkusen, 5 more games to go. Right. So a couple questions. First, who do you think is going to win the Champions League? Arsenal, PSG, Inter, Barcelona. And then second, would Harry Kane win the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich this year?
I'm not sure my sons would agree that I'm the football expert here, but I obviously have an opinion. So the first opinion is, will Bayern Munich win the Bundesliga? Yes, they will, of course. This year again, win the Bundesliga. It's still a shame that they got kicked out of the Champions League, but 2 games against Milano that they were exciting, and that was good football, and so that was fun, but not the outcome we wanted. So who will win the Champions League? Man, that's a big question.
That's a big question.
Yeah, I think the 2 teams that impressed me the most so far were PSG and Barcelona. I have to say, are the 2 top contenders in my eyes. I would, if I had to bet, I would put money on the team. I would say Barcelona this year. Yeah, they're in good shape again. What do you think?
I think it's either PSG or Barcelona. I would say this might be PSG's time.
All right.
They haven't won it yet, so we'll see. They have to go through Arsenal first.
All right.
So just to recap, we touched on Jürgen's journey, which is quite impressive. His take on financial institutions, infrastructure, and anything else we're missing?
Anything else we're missing? No, thank you for having me. I did not expect to be asked about football, but here you go. You heard what I said. I'm not sure my colleagues in the UK will all be happy what my responses were, but hey, we'll see.
All right, thank you, Jürgen. If you'd like to know more about what we do and how we support our clients, please go to www.withum.com/oasis. Spell OASYS. Thank you again, Jürgen. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll be first in line to hear what's coming next. Don't want to wait for our next episode? Check us out at withum.com. That's WITHUM.com.